Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Maybe the facility you manage could establish new revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services. Cart King International can be the answer to your needs. Cart King is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile coffee, food, and retail carts and kiosks. Cart King has been working with clients and corporations across North America for 20 years, providing innovative designs, custom manufacturing, and timely delivery. Carts and kiosks are fun, and so are the dozens of designs on our website. Please visit us today at www.cart-king.com or just call us at 1-877-986-7771 and get your sales rolling.
If you find yourself in need of legal representation, it can be a very stressful time in your life. In my career, I have dealt with thousands of lawyers, I've dealt with thousands of law firms, and I can confidently recommend to you Keith M. Davidson at kmdlaw.com. Available 24 hours, 7 days a week. Just log into kmdlaw.com. That's kmdlaw.com. Or you can call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. That's 833-4KMD-LAW. Personal injury, wrongful death, STDs, sexual assault, car accidents. They handle it all efficiently and professionally. It doesn't matter how imposing the opposition may be, because the team at kmdlaw.com are battle-tested and fierce. They will not stop until justice prevails. Go to kmdlaw.com or call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. If you're in for the fight of your life, stop screwing around and contact KMD Law. PureSoapFlakes.com, 218-568-2525. Have you ever heard of Castile Soap? Pure Soap Flake Company handcrafts fine soap bars, laundry powder, and concentrated soap flakes using organic vegetable oils from their northern Minnesota facility. Bathe your body and wash your clothes with Pure Soap products that are free of fragrance, GMOs, palm oil, sodium lauryl sulfate, and synthetic additives. Keep it clean, folks. Pure Soap Flake Company products are kind to living creatures and sensitive skin, safe for drains and waterways, and work great in high-efficiency washers and top and front-loading machines. They have a little promotion going on. Contact them to order some soap. Mention the Opperman Report. You're going to get a free gift. They're going to send a little extra soap, travel size, soap bars and laundry soap, cleaning soap flakes. I've been using that stuff all day long today. Great stuff. Order today at puresoapflakes.com or give them a call, 218-568-2525, 218-568-2525. Pure Soap Flake Company is a proud member of the Handcrafted Soap and Cosmetic Guild. The Opperman Report is brought to you by Aquadam.net. You can give them a call at 707-764-2119. A flooded home is never easy to deal with. You're left with the mess to clean up, the insurance companies to deal with, and not to mention all the memories, the precious memories that are lost in the flood. You can never replace those. And Aquadam can be a tool in your arsenal to protect your home and property from the floodwaters. The cofferdam is filled with water to control water and is reusable as long as it's taken care of. It can protect your home or business from rising floodwaters like a dam, but without the beavers. It can also be used in construction. If you need an area to be dewatered, an Aquadam can do the job. An Aquadam was used at SeaWorld in Orlando for the Mako roller coaster ride during the coaster's construction by dewatering the work area. An Aquadam is now dewatering the work area at San Antonio SeaWorld for their newest roller coaster ride. An Aquadam has been used in many construction projects all around the U.S. and all around the world. Now give Aquadam a call, 707-764-2119. You can look them up online at aquadam.net. You can find them on Facebook at Aquadam Inc. You call them up, you email them, you tell them Ed Opperman sent you, and they're going to take 10% off the price. Aquadam.net, 707-764-2119.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. You can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting by emailing me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com, or you can go to my website, emailrevealer.com. If you like our show, we'd love you to get your support at our Patreon. Put up brand new content every month on Patreon constantly. Just yesterday I uploaded a whole bunch of court documents, that lawsuit against the with the Smartmatic lawsuit. We put that up. Those brand new pictures of Jeffrey Epstein, we got them before anybody else, and put that up there at our Opperman Report Patreon. Our archives you can always find for free. You go to Spreaker.com, you go there, and there's a chat room, and there's also, what do you call it? So you get an email notification anytime we put up new content. Our guest today is a returning guest. As a matter of fact, you could find our first interview on Patreon that we did about a few months back. He's the author of the book, J. Michael Bennet, and he's the author of the book, Two Masters and Two Gospels, Volume 1, The Teachings of Jesus and the Leaven of the Pharisees in Talk Radio and Cable News. Now, you can find this book at MikeBennettBooks.com, also on Amazon.com, of course. His website is FutureQuake.com, and he's working on his blog series that he's very proud of at Two Spies Report on WordPress.com. Lost Causes Revisited. Mr. J. Michael Bennet, are you there?
Yes, sir. And thanks again for having me back. I hope I didn't bore your listeners to death a few months ago. And you're sure a man of your word. You said you'd have me back in a couple months. And you're one of these people who follow up. You're a rare commodity.
Oh, thank you. Well, it just has to be long enough that I don't remember, that I'm all, I forget who you are and I call you back.
Well, it's not like anything's going on in the world since we've talked. I mean, it's not like anybody's tried to overthrow our government or anything like that. So
that's so true.
No, been a pretty boring couple months.
By the way, do you like to be called J. Michael Bennet or what is it, John Michael Bennet?
Actually, I'm a Joseph Michael, but I go by Mike, so Mike's fine.
Gotcha. Now, in the description of your book, right, it says, why do American Christians today oppose the values of Jesus? Explain to us what you mean by that.
Sure. And by the way, this is not a discussion, be it in the book or just the topic, that is just of value to Christians, because it helps people who are not into that scene to help understand why they're doing some pretty bizarre stuff these days, okay? 'Cause I'm a practicing Christian myself, but I will confess to you that I feel very alienated, just to be upfront with the listeners, from a lot of the stuff that I see going on here in the Bible Belt where I was raised, and, very much in a religious right kind of background that I have been raised in my entire life and taught some really wonderful things that I believe are true. But there's a lot of cultural stuff that's really coming to a head right now, even since I wrote this book. And so even people who aren't Christians, I think it'll be interesting for what I show them, the hard data in my book, on how people got misled and who were the people and their motives financially for people to believe something inconsistent with what these, quote, Bible-believing Christians say is in their Bibles. And I'm one who's been in that camp, so I feel qualified to talk about it. But what triggered all this, and I don't want to beat a dead horse from our last interview because we stayed so much in philosophical underpinnings that we didn't get into the meat of the data. But in general, over the years since I was in the last stages of doing the Future Quake show, up until this long time underground writing a bunch of book manuscripts, and now I'm starting to release them, I started sensing a darkness and a coldness out of the warmth of the people here in the heartland, USA, where I've been raised, in Louisville, Kentucky, and growing up in Ohio as an adult, and then here in Nashville, Tennessee for the last 18 years. A place that prides itself on the warmth of the people based upon a conservative Christian tradition, as I was raised in, and in many ways religiously still am a part of. But I've seen this stridency and this coldness, and it really, if I would be fair, it was when I started really sensing some disturbing things, probably all the way back to 2010, 2011. Not that there wasn't problems going back to the time of my youth and before, but there was this big amp up when things started really getting weird over the whole anti-Sharia movement.
Right.
Because Middle Tennessee here became ground zero of the battle. It was almost like the walls of Constantinople, in an earlier holy war, where people flocked, the warriors and crusaders flocked from everywhere. Well, they came here because of some Islamic center being built in a college town outside of Nashville, Murfreesboro. But what I found is I started investing the time to try to study the background of all these religious celebrities who were coming into town. I hadn't heard much of a lot of them, but they were well known and very influential. And I started finding out they were saying some pretty hateful things that were under the guise of being, defending Christendom, that really didn't have any basis in Scripture or the teachings of Jesus or whatever. But I started finding their connections to some deep pockets in corporate world, in foreign governments, in militaristic organizations, and they were using these people as mouthpieces. And they were trying to come up with some kind of, I won't say white supremacy, but sort of what we would call Western Caucasian supremacy, cultural supremacy, and trying to wrap it in the guise of some religious underpinnings to basically get people worked up in a very jaded society to make this a holy war. And that's what got me into writing what's now a 12-volume series called The Holy War Chronicles, to see how that has evolved, first of all in America, but then even in just world history. But I started seeing these demagogues pop up making outrageous claims about people, and as the internet provided additional media arms for people to widely disperse messages, where they were spreading it faster than anybody could debunk some of these wild claims they were making, it took on a life of its own. And I started seeing it in our churches, where they started believing that certain people were sacrificing kids and they were doing this and that during the anti-Sharia movement, and making just wild radical claims over people they knew nothing about.
Well, so, Mike, let me ask you this. What do you think now with the local churches, right?
Yeah.
And I know what you're talking about. I got saved, I guess it was 1989. I got saved at a church in Las Vegas, Assemblies of God Church. Yeah, okay. And then I went back to Staten Island. I got baptized in the Holy Spirit in the Assemblies of God Church. And I was a leftist. I've always been a socialist, a leftist my whole life. Conservative, but, on the left. And I'm so turned off by these right-wing, closed-minded, militaristic people you have in the church that are against immigration, helping the refugees, that are against funding food stamps for hungry children, and all these horrible, evil attitudes. Now, how does that come? No, I know you're talking about the big picture, the being funded,
right,
but the local church, why do they abandon everything Jesus taught us?
That's what gets into the current book that I have published, because what I saw directed toward the people of another religion and the Islamic community, and particularly immigrants coming in and things, and started seeing these real strident positions. And then I started seeing it in local church from people who were just sweet people that would, help you if you needed help or whatever. I started seeing this flip side. And I think it's what a lot of people saw probably a generation prior toward black people in the church, the kind of churches I was raised in. It was sort of like a hushed racism, like you don't want your kid dating a black person, or what if they move in your neighborhood, or this or that. And then you had guys like Jerry Falwell used to preach about the curse of Ham, and that the sons of Noah, and how he was dark-skinned and led to the African races, and the Bible says he was cursed, and so there's some excuses to either keep them enslaved or as an underclass, and all this kind of stuff where you try to backfit some kind of religious background to support the outright racism and bigotry that we have. They just find new targets. At the beginning of the 20th century, there was a major anti-immigrant movement. It found its ways in a lot of fundamentalist churches. And I, just to disclose, you mentioned your upbringing. I was raised in a Southern Baptist church on the outskirts of Louisville, very country in a lot of ways. Wonderful, good teaching, wonderful experiences. I learned the main stuff about Jesus there. But I was raised in that and stayed in the Baptist church, and now have been affiliated with another conservative church called Calvary Chapel. So, this is where I come from. And for most of my adult life, I didn't question a lot of things. Because you were given the implication, if you started questioning some of these cultural things that they had about the poor people, like you're talking about, what we were told, it's all lazy people, who buy T-bone steaks with their food stamps, or drive Cadillacs. That's what I was raised in. People who had any kind of public assistance or whatever. If you question any of that, well, then you're questioning Jesus, or you're questioning the Bible. If you start questioning these kind of things, and so it's taken time for me to dedicate the time to very carefully unwrap these kind of things and see how completely different they are from what we read from simple words of Jesus and the guys that followed him. And what I found, and I document in this book, was that there have been forces who had a vested financial interest in being able to maintain that narrative, and they found the group that could help keep everybody in line was the clergy, and by clergy, to the overwhelming number of practicing Christians in America. So they began building a narrative to basically conserve the status quo of who were the haves and who had a seat at the table of societal influence. And they found the clergy was the most effective mouthpiece to be able to do that. And that is really what I get at in the book. And in our last discussion on here, I talked about the beginning of the book of how I really felt burdened to sort of veer away from wrapping up on the religious holy war book series to address this because of the last 4 or 5 years on how the hate has been broadened to be more like a Dirty Harry kind of thing. Dirty Harry used to say he wasn't racist because he hated everybody. And that's what I see in a lot of my fellow, quote, Bible-believing Christians, is that they've expanded their hate to include just about anybody outside their circles. I saw it was becoming such a menace. I mean, here we had people storming our Capitol, threatening to hang all of the, Congress people while they're carrying signs that says Jesus saves on it and things like this.
And actually praying. They were actually praying at the same time, too, as well.
What in the world is going on with the society? And then we find lots of sympathizers who try to excuse or divert what went on, and they say, well, I wasn't part of that. I didn't have the horns on my head and a QAnon flag, but yet they try to excuse, divert, refuse to admit there's a problem. And so in the last time we visited, I laid out how this other gospel developed that really showed itself to be an enemy of the poor, enemy of the downtrodden, supported big business, wealth class, privatizing everything, making everything for profit. And in the early part of my book, I sort of show how this was the same identical teaching and value system the Pharisees taught, and Jesus called it out. He said, this is what is the leaven of the Pharisees. You need to avoid this. And it says in Scripture that the Pharisees opposed them because they were lovers of money. And so that affected how they looked at the little people, people on the margins, anyone who needed help. Because they were lovers of money and they saw themselves as elite or elect, I guess you could say, they justified this kind of view, looking down at other people. And I take about 30 hot-button issues, the kind of issues we debate in the public sector today, and I compare what Jesus and the apostles wrote on it and then what you hear on talk radio and cable news. And it turns out there's almost no overlap at all. And one of the points I make in my book about media saturation in our minds is that if you think about it, let's say you're one of these few people that go to a decent church that actually has Bible teaching, and on a good Sunday, they may actually come and teach about the Sermon on the Mount or what the teachings were of Jesus, when he walked the earth on a best Sunday. Okay, and you might get 20 minutes of that. And some of the people may be half asleep or their mind's wandering or whatever. They're sitting there because their spouse drug them there. The rest of the week, they get up, they go have their 30 to 45-minute commute. They turn on talk radio, and they hear a vastly different gospel about what the status is of the poor or the immigrant, the alien, as the Bible calls them, the stranger is the term used, how we are to look at them and what their motives and what God thinks about them. They'll talk about that for 45 minutes. Then they get to work. They turn on talk radio in the background, and it's all in almost on a subliminal level, playing all day while they're working at their computer during the day. Then they get back in their car, have another 45-minute commute, listening to the same mindset. Then they get home, fix dinner, turn on cable news, and watch the same thing while they're eating their news until they drift off to sleep. Get up the next day, repeat it 5-6 days a week, and even on Sunday morning before they go to church, they turn on the the news talk cable TV before they head off to church. Hear the same mindset. So you've got 20 minutes at best a week versus hours and hours during the week of a totally different perspective from the Bible. Now, you know enough about brainwashing.
And also at the same time, too, those same radio hosts are calling themselves conservative Christians.
Oh, conservative.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and they'll say praise Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, praise Jesus, and they'll have their favorite Christian leader on who will reinforce everything they say.
Exactly.
And so by sheer saturation, that's why, and this is what triggered me to write the book, was that I started noticing when I talked to fellow Christians about the public issues of the day that were controversial, and we debated, what was the best remedies and how to address them. They were not quoting Scripture.
Right.
They were not quoting what Jesus said. What they were quoting, I noticed, were talking points that I had heard on talk radio or cable news. And like the very week they started saturating the media, and what happens is, if people don't know, you have a savvy audience, but what happens is there are either literal or figurative memos that go out that have certain buzzwords and phrases that go out to these media outlets, and they say, push this. Here's how you want to frame the narrative, how you push, and they send it to their favorite big media outlets, whether it's Rush or Sean Hannity or these other ones. And so they all simultaneously start using certain terms and words to frame the debate or to frame the opposition. Well, what I was finding is my Christian friends were using those exact terms almost immediately, never citing what Jesus said or what the people who they say they follow. Now, again, this is not an indictment of your listeners who are not conservative Christians. I'm just trying to explain to them what got in these people's heads and how they were targeted. I'm not excusing them either, but they were targeted. And in about one page, the key turning point in my book is page 168. And that's when I get into giving the history I found of how they hit on this. The vested interest has figured out how to use this particular system and put huge amounts of money through key figures to start building a whole alternative gospel, I call it, on how to look at everyone in the world and all the issues of the world, and carefully, piece by piece, basically brainwashed people who are professing believers, which are a very, very large part of our society today.
Mike, when I first I grew up in a Catholic church, okay? And again, too, when I moved to Staten Island, a right-wing racist Catholic church. I came from the Bronx to Staten Island.
Got it.
And then I, got saved as an adult, right? And I repented, sincerely repented. And there were certain behaviors I was indulging in, sexual behaviors and alcohol and things that you need to have a more conservative lifestyle, right? So you say, well, you almost think you have to be this kind of conservative. It's almost mandatory to identify yourself as a conservative in order to be considered a Christian. But there are things that I guess the liberals or the Democrats or whatever the other side do promote, like homosexuality and abortion and stuff like that, that could be, I have my own opinions on that, but could be considered that, well, this is anti-Christianity.
Right.
Especially the homosexuality part. That's pretty straightforward. There are scriptures but against all sexual immorality, not just the homosexual immorality, all sexual, and against obesity and drunkenness, which goes on all over the place with these pastors. How many fat pastors you see? Most of them are fat. Most of them are glutton and obese. But what do you land on the issue of abortion? And that seems to be a real litmus test for the right-wing Christian. What is your opinion of the Bible says about abortion?
Well, I would be classified as a pro-life person because I value human life. And particularly, I think a lot of this is the framework and the priorities you derive. And do you have the same priorities that the Bible has as priorities? The Bible puts an emphasis on who are the most vulnerable and protecting the most vulnerable. That is a hallmark of people who think like God thinks. So little babies are obviously going to fall into that category. But, you immediately diverted from the narrative of my book. And actually, I don't even mention that because it's such a hot potato that I didn't want to lose the reader yet in the remainder of the book, because people have a hard time rationally and carefully thinking about that issue because they've been so emotionally conditioned really since the late 1970s. And there was a reason behind that too, just like there was in the other financial things that I talk about in my book. The late 1970s is when, and I'll exclude the Catholics a little bit. Catholics have always had a pretty consistent position on this, but the rest of their religious right people had a very different view. And it's shocking when I went back and looked in history on how they looked at these issues. And I'm going to eventually write probably a small book on this topic because it's one of the elephants in the room. And it's something, you can avoid it to try not to split people, but it's something that's got to be resolved, and people of faith need to resolve and be very open-minded in understanding what the mind of God is on things. But what I was going to say, in the late 70s, there was sort of an about-face in the religious right on this issue. One thing I was shocked with, the Southern Baptists, who are considered to be probably the largest segment of flag bearers of conservative Christianity, where I was raised, right after Roe v. Wade passed, I was shocked to find out that they issued an official proclamation from the Southern Baptist Convention endorsing Roe v. Wade. They actually said that they thought that it was proper and appropriate, and fellow other conservative Christians said the same thing. Guys I was shocked looking at how far they went. W.A. Criswell, who's considered one of the most preeminent arch-conservative theologians in America, actually wrote that he didn't even think that a baby was a human until some considerable time after it had left the womb.
Wow.
And this is what the prevailing thinking was. And so all this didn't happen in a vacuum when this happened. Now, here's a curious thing that's happened since Roe v. Wade. And I've always been, against it and pro-life attitude. But what I have found is that people like of my camp call themselves pro-life. If you really peel the onion back, they're really not so much pro-life as they are anti-Roe v. Wade.
Or pro-birth, actually, because especially too, okay, listen, every human life is precious, and no one wants to see a life lost or prevented. But if you look at the number one reason why people get abortions, it's economics. They can't afford it.
That's right. That's
and
right.
I know. Then drug addiction is another one. Sex trafficking. You're being abused. Those are the things we need to cure. What I mean?
Well,
and if you really cared about human life, you'd be addressing those issues.
You're doing a mind meld with me. Okay. You just I always say, why say it in 10 words when 100 will do? So it just takes me a while to spit it out. But you're getting to the crux of it. A true holistically pro-life person would say, not is how can we do legislation to say gotcha, that we can overcome our enemies, but we would say, how can we save the most babies? That's what a pro-life person does. How can we save the most babies? The way to save the most babies is to make sure that we create an environment that best cultivates those babies coming into the world, being nurtured, and grow into adulthood. That's the best way to save the most babies and thus be pro-life on that issue. And what I find is my fellow conservative pro-lifers seem very ambivalent about providing prenatal care for expectant mothers, health care. In fact, they got all behind legislation at the beginning of the previous presidential term to get rid of any kind of health care, including for those with pre-existing conditions. I mean, it's a very Darwinian view that they have on just about everything. And that includes providing the proper environment for children to be raised. Now, here's another dose of realism that is not talked about in their idealism, because idealism is what shuts down their thinking and actually keeps them in lockstep. Sadly, abortion is something that is easier to hide it occurring, and thus a very real life taken, just as much whether it's an official abortion, than prohibition and moonshine still. We know how effective prohibition was at stopping the destruction of alcohol in the lives of human beings. We know that in history. Did prohibition stop the abuse of alcohol? No, it just drove it underground. People were generating rot gut. People were taking greater risk, and it was a disaster. Crime came up about it. Vast underground activity went on because it really was generally unenforceable. Now we have a situation where there were so many abortions going on in the back alleys that nobody knows about, that passing a law saying that you can't do a legal abortion makes everybody feel better. You can pat each other on the back and say, well, we did something. We stopped this great evil. Okay? And taking human life is a terrible thing. But it didn't really stop the abortions. All it did was it made people feel like, well, they're not doing it in our face, and so we've stopped these kind of things. The irony is that today, as we speak, there are less abortions going on now under Roe v. Wade than before it passed.
Really?
I'm talking about in doctor's offices. I'm talking about official abortions. Official abortions are less now than before it was passed.
Yeah, Mike, too.
And there's a reason why, if I can just add this one thought. The big decline occurred after 2008, and it dropped precipitously. And that was the same time as when expectant mothers started getting health coverage and assistance, and the abortion rate plummeted at this point. So the data, and I have collected that data and got it from multiple sources. I suggest the skeptical listener to do their own due diligence on it. But the data tells you the story. It's
and the same people will tell you they want to close down Planned Parenthood, which is providing these kind of services.
Well, now the Catholic community has a far-reaching opinion that part of taking life is even stopping contraception.
Right.
And I respect the fact that they're consistent in that. I respect them in that. But even then, they use roundabout ways to skin the cat the same way, with rhythm method or other kind of means. And so you could say that they're just using other means, non-chemical means, to go around this whole argument of God wanting us to procreate a lot. If you can manually resist cohabitation, and by their argument of getting in the way of God's cohabiting, and procreating the earth, you could actually, by that argument, stop that procreating just as much that way as you could by chemical means. So really, if you're going to go down that argument that God wants us to perpetually breed and this stuff stops it, well, the fact that you withhold relations with your spouse is really the same kind of resistance to that. And so that's part of the difficulty with that argument. But as far as on the, for those who don't have that belief in conservative Christians, they fight tooth and nail against contraception as well, too. And so what it does is it creates an environment where life is taken as a result, and they seem that is more acceptable to them than to prevent that great sin or tragedy in the meantime. So that diverts away from my book, but since you asked me the question, probably lost about 2/3 of the audience with that. But
no, I don't think so. But we have to take a commercial break anyway, so maybe they'll come back.
Well, yeah, because there's something that I think we can more consistently argue, and that is how moneyed interest started investing in people to actually get us to accept their values and their greed values rather than the values that the carpenter from Nazareth taught us.
I would like to hammer you down and nail you down. Speaking of carpenters, nail you down on exactly who these moneyed interests are, if you can be more specific. But we'll be right back. We are with J. Michael Bennet. The book is called Two Masters and Two Gospels, Volume 1. The Teaching of Jesus versus the Leaven of the Pharisees in talk radio and cable news. You can find him at MikeBennettBooks.com. FutureQuake.com is another website. His blog series, Lost Cause Revisited, you could find on twospiesreport.wordpress.com. We'll be right back with more of J. Michael Bennet after these messages. And now a word from our sponsors. If you find yourself in need of legal representation, it can be a very stressful time in your life. In my career, I have dealt with thousands of lawyers, I've dealt with thousands of law firms, and I can confidently recommend to you Keith M. Davidson at kmdlaw.com. Available 24 hours, 7 days a week. Just log into kmdlaw.com, or you can call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. They handle it all efficiently and professionally. It doesn't matter how imposing the opposition may be, because the team at kmdlaw.com are battle-tested and fierce. They will not stop until justice prevails. Go to kmdlaw.com or call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. If you're in for the fight of your life, stop screwing around and contact KMD Law.
Are you ready to change your life, but don't know how to start? Is your stress and worries keeping you awake at night? Have you been battling grief, anxiety, or depression all alone? Have you lost touch with your own sense of being or spirituality? Soul Free Therapies offers professional and affordable live video streaming counseling and coaching services from the comfort of your own home. Sessions offered in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Go to our website at www.soul-free.com and book your first session today.
The Opperman Report is brought to you by Aquadam.net. You can give them a call at 707-764-2119. A flooded home is never easy to deal with. You're left with the mess to clean up, the insurance companies to deal with, and not to mention all the memories, the precious memories that are lost in the flood. You can never replace those. And Aquadam can be a tool in your arsenal to protect your home and property from the floodwaters. The cofferdam is filled with water to control water and is reusable as long as it's taken care of. It can protect your home or business from rising floodwaters like a dam, but without the beavers. It can also be used in construction. If you need an area to be dewatered, an Aquadam can do the job. An Aquadam was used at SeaWorld in Orlando for the Mako roller coaster ride during the coaster's construction by dewatering the work area. An Aquadam is now dewatering the work area at San Antonio SeaWorld for their newest roller coaster ride. An Aquadam has been used in many construction projects all around the U.S. and all around the world. Now give Aquadam a call, 707-764-2119. You can look them up online at aquadam.net. You can find them on Facebook at Aquadam Inc. You call them up, you email them, you tell them Ed Opperman sent you, and they're going to take 10% off the price. Aquadam.net, 707-764-2119. PureSoapFlakes.com, 218-568-2525. Have you ever heard of Castile Soap? Pure Soap Flake Company handcrafts fine soap bars, laundry powder, and concentrated soap flakes using organic vegetable oils from their northern Minnesota facility. Bathe your body and wash your clothes with Pure Soap products that are free of fragrance, GMOs, palm oil, sodium lauryl sulfate, and synthetic additives. Keep it clean, folks. Pure Soap Flake Company products are kind to living creatures and sensitive skin, safe for drains and waterways, and work great in high-efficiency washers and top and front-loading machines. They have a little promotion going on. Contact them to order some soap. Mention the Opperman Report. You're going to get a free gift. They're going to send a little extra soap, travel size, soap bars and laundry soap, cleaning soap flakes. I've been using that stuff all day long today. Great stuff. Order today at puresoapflakes.com or give them a call, 218-568-2525, 218-568-2525. Pure Soap Flake Company is a proud member of the Handcrafted Soap and Cosmetic Guild.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, here with J. Michael Bennet, Two Masters and Two Gospels, Volume 1, The Teaching of Jesus versus the Leaven of the Pharisees. You can find him at MikeBennettBooks.com, futurequake.com, and his blog series Lost Cause Revisited at Two Spies Report on WordPress.com. Now, I said I was going to nail you down there, Mr. Bennett. Name some names. Tell us who's funding this stuff. Go ahead.
You're the guy who throws the grenade under the tent with the abortion issue and the other broad issue. I'm like the guards at the Nuremberg trials. I'm just following orders from you here, okay? So
Gotcha.
I hope we didn't lose everybody on that debate. That debate, we could have 10 shows on that one issue. But getting back to this one issue about the financial business interest who decided to invest in targeting the clergy, which started around 1940. The normal audience that I talk to in my books and target are conservative Christians who are highly skeptical of what I share with them. And so they are in extreme disbelief, and that's why I have to very, very carefully document the people that I mention. And the whole concept is repugnant to them, that they could have been hoodwinked, or their parents, or their ministers, or the ministers that taught them. And so to be able to get them to understand even the potential that they could have been hoodwinked in these kind of things, I give them another example in the beginning of my historical section of my book, in that how the main elements of our belief in America's divine destiny, that we were set up by God, America is a special nation to do a special mission in the world, that you hear a lot of this stuff taught not only in our churches and media, but like David Barton sort of made a cottage industry out of it, very lucrative. This stuff really started growing. Like, for example, Ronald Reagan made a big part of this, talking about America's divine destiny. One of these famous stories that he tells that nobody, until somebody later, investigative journalists, found out where he got this information. He was famous in his speeches about telling a story about how when they couldn't get the Constitution settled and get it all, finished up, and there was major debate, there was this mysterious figure that showed up in the sealed room, and this mysterious figure suddenly provided the narrative that united everybody, and once they'd all signed the document, then he disappeared. And it was a very inspirational talk. Everybody loved it. Well, he got that from Manly P. Hall, who was like one of the most noted occult teachers in Southern California back in the 20s and 30s. That has written an occult treatise about the secret destiny of America, and had written a lot of it, but none of it was remotely Christian at all. In fact, it was mostly anti-Christian in these writings. And a lot of people don't know that Ronald Reagan, the beloved figure he was really deep into astrology. Not just having Gene Dixon into the White House, but actually when he was inaugurated and took the oath to be governor of California, he insisted on taking the oath at midnight, which seems a little weird. Most politicians don't take their oaths at midnight. And the reason why was that the astrological charts that had been done for him and Nancy dictated that midnight was the best time that the stars would be in alignment for him to have a successful term. And this influenced a lot of the decisions he made later in his term. And a lot of Christians would just be greatly incensed to even consider the fact that these influences would be there. But this whole idea of divine destiny, and we can see in some measure there is a historical precedent, because the Puritans came over armed with a Calvinistic view of election, that they were the elect. And they even wrote at the time that they believed that they were the new nation of Israel, that were going to the promised land, except it was the New World. So they adopted the whole narrative of the Hebrews that came into Canaan, and they classified the Indians as Canaanites or Amalekites. And these were the people that in the Bible were instructed to be eradicated and destroyed without mercy. And so by doing that, they not only propped up their own election of who they were, but justified, like when they immolated all the Pequot Indians, they took the women and children, walled them up in a fort and burned it down. And they declared the first declaration of Thanksgiving, state Thanksgiving, because the smell of the burning flesh, according to the I think Bradford, the head of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, he said their burning flesh was a sweet savor unto the Lord. So a lot of this does have some older roots, but what really made it take off for those of us who were raised in conservative churches, and all of this other stuff about, one nation under God, getting divine destiny, was actually kicked off in 1947. And the reason why it was kicked off by President Truman was that the studies that they had done with the think tanks at the end of World War II and the beginning of the Cold War was they were actually afraid that the American public were actually going to find communism somewhat attractive, because a lot of the working class people evidently had disputes with labor, violent disputes with the Rockefellers and others. There had been a great inequity in income throughout the industrial age, Gilded Age, much of the West, particularly in the United States, all the robber baron era and stuff. And so they sensed some discontent in America. We're not taught that now. That's sort of been swept under the rug. But they were so worried that they were going to find communism attractive that they made a declaration that they had to make the Cold War with the capitalism against the communism a holy war, a religious-fueled holy war. Because since America was such a religious, at least fairly religious society, if they could emphasize the atheism of what we see in the Bolshevik version of communism, if they could emphasize that, they can make it a holy war and make them resist some of these things that they may have thought were temptations. So what they did was, in May 1947, they had a key event at the White House. They brought in all of the groups from the new propaganda outfits, the new security state, what event, OSS converting into the CIA. 1947 was the time the CIA was set up, as well as Department of Defense. But they brought in these key figures, but also CEOs of the major companies who had worked with them during World War II to sort of, in a weird sense, almost run America like it was a centralized state like Russia during the war. And figures like the head of General Motors, who I go in detail here, were largely running our economy. And they were not allowing collective bargaining for salaries. They were price fixing everything. They were doing everything the communists did, and these CEO figures were running it. They brought these guys in and
keeping all the profits too.
Right, exactly. I mean, DuPont made all their money basically off of, in the early days of World War I and later World War II on selling explosives on both sides. Mm-hmm. But what they formed is a group called the American Heritage Foundation. And what they proposed was to try to invigorate a generic faith, or what you call civil religion, into the public square to try to win a Cold War propaganda and psychological conflict. So that kicked off all sorts of things that we now, many of us assume, go back to the beginning of our nation. This whole concept of Washington bowing his knee in the snow at Valley Forge, the whole theme of "In God We Trust," that we see on everything from our coins around us to stamps to everything else. All of this was birthed by these CEOs and these CIA and other propaganda figures from that board meeting and subsequent meetings afterwards. And what they wrote in their documents was that they were to use religion for psychological warfare against enemy nations to dishearten and control hearts and minds, and develop what they called a blueprint for spiritual mobilization. Now, they released a document. Oh, in another group that they used, have you ever heard of the Advertising Council?
Yeah,
they run a lot of commercials on TV.
Yeah.
A lot of it's, good public stuff. But it was originally called the War Advertising Council. And this was all run by Madison Avenue to support the war effort. They dropped the war part afterwards, but it was all what helped Wall Street and also helped do the war, dual objectives. But this document that they released after 15 months was called One Nation Under God. And that was a term that they invented that they wanted to start cementing on the minds of Americans. And they say in there that because of the Cold War, that there was, quote, the need to weld religion to democracy, unquote. And partly what they were going to start doing and spend considerable money doing is to, quote, make public comparisons between the Bible and America's most revered national documents. And President Eisenhower adopted this as well, too. You know, he was sort of funny about religion, too. He was raised a Jehovah's Witness.
Really?
Yeah. But his advisors told him when he was elected that if he was going to sell this message, he needed to join a regular church. So he had the, I guess, first and only baptism of a sitting president in history in the National Presbyterian Church. And he did this, you know, in a public way to sort of support this. You know, he was quoted as saying that for democracy to work, it had to be based on religion. And, quote, he didn't care what it was. Now, that's how important the fundamental tenets of the faith are. And what they did was they soon thereafter, through Congress, they began printing "In God We Trust" on stamps, cancel letters. They took the Pledge of Allegiance, which was used selectively. And, you know, ironically, I don't know if you know where that came from. It came from a gentleman by the name of Francis Bellamy, who was a Southern Baptist, but he was also, he was a Baptist, but he was also a socialist. He wrote the book, Jesus is a Socialist. But the Pledge of Allegiance, originally, it used to have a straight arm salute, where your palms down, but it was a fixed arm straight ahead toward the flag. Looked like the Nazi salute, only it was the hand was turned differently. But they added "Under God" to that in 1954. It was part of this same program. They didn't really disclose to the public, but they made documents basically saying about the Christian roots of Christianity, and Congress paid for and printed 681,000 of them to dispense to the public for this religious indoctrination.
Mike, let me ask you this, because we've only got about 3 minutes left.
Oh, my, we're just getting started.
I know, man. We're going to have you back.
We haven't even talked about how they plan to make everybody go through universal military training, including hours and hours of spiritual training, to make holy warriors out of all of us.
We're going to come back, but also, too, you said you had some stuff, but there was a UFO cult as well and some other people involved?
Well, what we're going to find out in this book, if you would be so gracious as to have me back, is that when I begin showing how the National Association of Businesses and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce got with the first prosperity gospel preacher, James Fifield Jr., back in just after 1940, to start building a Christian media empire to target clergy with a pro-business message that made government evil, satanic enemy, that made pensions bad, old age pensions, any kind of public assistance. You get the routine. When they started doing that, these documents they were sending out, including paying clergy in America to preach these sermons, they were also giving them religious training. And the gurus that I will show in here are some guys that were the most influential people in American history, and almost no one knows. And they're not even Americans. But they actually were the ones that started the LSD movement in corporate America in the 1950s, where a large segment of our CEOs, the most powerful in America, were taking LSD in the 1950s. They started the first UFO cult religions around 1950. And the whole paranormal and what we would call New Age community was started by these same figures who were writing and teaching our conservative clergy these other hyper-libertarian values of turning their back on the poor and needy and the people that were different. It's affected even 12-step programs, and it's a story that, to my knowledge, has not really been fully told until this book, and I would love to give details if you'll have me back.
We will have you back, and if people ever wondered why we have a history channel that has 24/7 ancient alien UFO stuff that's owned by Rupert Murdoch, okay? Because Rupert Murdoch is pushing his stuff down your throat, and he's not your friend. The guest today is J. Michael Bennet. Two Masters and Two Gospels, Volume 1, The Teaching of Jesus versus the Leaven of the Pharisees in Talk Radio and Cable News. I really encourage people to get this book. You can find it at MikeBennettBooks.com. Futurequake.com is another one of his websites. And he's got a blog series, Lost Cause Revisited, at Two Spies Report at WordPress.com. J. Michael Bennet, thank you so much.
Please have me back, because there's a lot of details I want to talk about the psychological operations that was done at tremendous expense, household names doing it, totally framed how we're thinking, and until we know this, we can't break free of it.
Excellent. I look forward to it. Thank you, Michael.
Okay.
And now a word from our sponsors, emailrevealer.com. People ask me all the time, hey, Ed, are you still a private investigator? I sure am. Go to emailrevealer.com. We handle adoption investigations, infidelity investigations, where you give us your spouse's email address. We trace it back to online dating websites, catch them cheating online. Email tracing, locate or identify somebody from as little as an anonymous email address. Someone owe you money? Back child support? We can find that deadbeat, locate his hidden assets, locate his hidden bank accounts, find his current place of employment, and even assist you in obtaining a judgment and recover that judgment for you. Emailrevealer.com, digital forensics, computer forensics, cell phone forensics, recover deleted text messages, create a report that you can use in court. Emailrevealer.com, 800-572-9762. The Opperman Report is brought to you by Aquadam.net. You can give them a call at 707-764-2119. A flooded home is never easy to deal with. You're left with the mess to clean up, the insurance companies to deal with, and not to mention all the memories, the precious memories that are lost in the flood. You can never replace those. And Aquadam can be a tool in your arsenal to protect your home and property from the floodwaters. The cofferdam is filled with water to control water and is reusable as long as it's taken care of. It can protect your home or business from rising floodwaters like a dam, but without the beavers. It can also be used in construction. If you need an area to be dewatered, an Aquadam can do the job. An Aquadam was used at SeaWorld in Orlando for the Mako roller coaster ride during the coaster's construction by dewatering the work area. An Aquadam is now dewatering the work area at San Antonio SeaWorld for their newest roller coaster ride. An Aquadam has been used in many construction projects all around the U.S. and all around the world. Now give Aquadam a call, 707-764-2119. You can look them up online at aquadam.net. You can find them on Facebook at Aquadam Inc. You call them up, you email them, you tell them Ed Opperman sent you, and they're going to take 10% off the price. Aquadam.net, 707-764-2119.
Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Maybe the facility you manage could establish new revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services. Cart King International can be the answer to your needs. Cart King is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile coffee, food, and retail carts and kiosks. Cart King has been working with clients and corporations across North America for 20 years, providing innovative designs, custom manufacturing, and timely delivery. Carts and kiosks are fun, and so are the dozens of designs on our website. Please visit us today at www.cart-king.com or just call us at 1-877-986-7771 and get your sales rolling.
If you find yourself in need of legal representation, it can be a very stressful time in your life. In my career, I have dealt with thousands of lawyers, I've dealt with thousands of law firms, and I can confidently recommend to you Keith M. Davidson at kmdlaw.com. Available 24 hours, 7 days a week. Just log into kmdlaw.com, or you can call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. Personal injury, wrongful death, STDs, sexual assault, car accidents. They handle it all efficiently and professionally. It doesn't matter how imposing the opposition may be, because the team at kmdlaw.com are battle-tested and fierce. They will not stop until justice prevails. Go to kmdlaw.com or call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. If you're in for the fight of your life, stop screwing around and contact KMD Law. PureSoapFlakes.com, 218-568-2525. Have you ever heard of Castile Soap? Pure Soap Flake Company handcrafts fine soap bars, laundry powder, and concentrated soap flakes using organic vegetable oils from their northern Minnesota facility. Bathe your body and wash your clothes with Pure Soap products that are free of fragrance, GMOs, palm oil, sodium lauryl sulfate, and synthetic additives. Keep it clean, folks. Pure Soap Flake Company products are kind to living creatures and sensitive skin, safe for drains and waterways, and work great in high-efficiency washers and top and front-loading machines. They have a little promotion going on. Contact them to order some soap. Mention the Opperman Report. You're going to get a free gift. They're going to send a little extra soap, travel size, soap bars and laundry soap, cleaning soap flakes. I've been using that stuff all day long today. Great stuff. Order today at puresoapflakes.com. or give them a call, 218-568-2525, 218-568-2525. Pure Soap Flake Company is a proud member of the Handcrafted Soap and Cosmetic Guild.
Are you ready to change your life, but don't know how to start? Is your stress and worries keeping you awake at night? Have you been battling grief, anxiety, or depression all alone? Have you lost touch with your own sense of being or spirituality? Soul Free Therapies offers professional and affordable live video streaming counseling and coaching services from the comfort of your own home. Sessions offered in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Go to our website at www.soul-free.com and book your first session today.